recording. Ooh,
Right,
correct.
been trying to get in.
Hopefully
Recording in progress.
Okay, thank you, Matt, Toby, and everyone else. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. May we have a roll call,
Oh, and I
please?
don't have my roll call list, but I'm ready. All right, Liz Barrett, Pip Clues,
Here.
Lisa Rappaport,
Here.
Ann Walker,
Here.
Margot Peabody,
Here,
Nancy Claiborne,
Here.
Hope Van Epps.
She's on her way via
she's,
Zoom.
she's waiting in the waiting room, it says.
Okay, great. Brian French. Here. Carrie Nolte. And Danielle Miles. And Nick Duckland.
Okay, can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have a motion to go into public comment? Move. A second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, is there anyone for public comment? Do we have anyone in Zoom for public comment? They haven't raised their hand? Okay. That's not Hope, is it? Oh, it is. Okay. All right, do we have a motion to close the public comment? So move. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, workshop session number 4 on the fiscal year 24 budget. Should I hand it over to you?
Sure.
Okay.
So we, I think we've talked about the fact that we originally were scheduled this for some time with People Services, and then based on the requests from folks, moved towards ESSER positions. So you have, we've got the big sheets, Nathan.
Yep.
So we're going to pass around, Nathan is going to walk you through primarily, and I'll chime in when needed, a set of slides around the ESSER positions to kind of reorient you towards kind of what's in there, some conversations that have been happening on the city side, some evolution of that.
Mine?
That is yours right there. And then we have some suggested courses of actions, and then some alternatives as well for you. So first, before we get into Nathan's slides, just what he's passing around now is the what we've been doing with ESSER up to this point. Now, I'll say this is partially the case. What you don't have, because we, in all honesty, we're running out of columns, you don't have CARES Act, ESSER 1, the stuff that you guys were originally dealing with. It was probably all masks and those sort of things. So that doesn't appear here, but ESSER 2, and then ESSER 3 is broken out into 2 separate columns. You may or may not remember, ESSER 2 was pretty broad in terms of what it could go towards. ESSER 3 was also broad, but ESSER 3 expected on the federal side that 20% of your spending would go towards learning loss in some form. So Nathan's broken it out for us around projects that are identified towards that 20% number for learning loss, and then everything else that would be in ESSER 3. Just a reminder on all this, we need to wrap up, our ESSER spending needs to be wrapped by the end of September 2024. And so that's the context of all of those things in terms of where you've been and what the plan has been in relation to your ESSER proposals. And then Nathan will take us through in a little bit more detail.
Can I just ask one
Yeah.
question before we start? Did the city council,
Excuse me, is that a new document you guys are looking at that was a handout tonight, or is that our green and?
no, it's a new
It's a
document.
new version of it, but I'll send it to you in just a second.
Okay, thank you, Nathan.
You bet.
Hello, Hope?
I need to state for the record my attendance and that I'm at 37 Phoenix, Arizona, in the house with 2 relatives, but alone in another section of the home.
Great.
Is it warm there, Hope?
Yes.
Not so much here. I wasn't sure she was going to answer. Quick question, Nathan. Did the
Yes.
city council vote last night that the number is 4.5%?
They did, and that's
Will be
in
included
that's in the
Okay,
slides
go
coming
ahead.
up. Yep.
I just said it. I heard that. And I
Nancy
thought,
put all the time in last night. She's
Yeah.
going to, let you know.
Okay, Nathan, you're on.
So, Hope, we're gonna hide you, I think, because he's gonna share a slideshow which I can also send to you when we're done. Let me stumble and try to get this email sent to Hope, but actually, let me talk to the slides, and then we'll go back. Hope, I hope that, just so that you know, and for the public, we'll add this to the packet. This ESSER plan that Zach just spoke to, this tabloid size, it really is not measurably different from what you've been looking at recently. I just put it all on one page instead of a two-sided, and I did those colored bars on the right to try to give a sense of to which of the grants and to what purpose we think we can attribute those to meet the expectations. So really, other than for our purposes today to talk about the ESSER positions, I did tweak some of the values related to those positions in FY24 because I identified better health and dental elections, what the total benefit costs were, et cetera. So some of those numbers are off by just a few dollars up or down, but that was to actualize those for our purposes. Otherwise, that's not a brand new document. You've seen that document before. I've just repackaged it. So Matt, if you could pull the slides up and then play Vanna White for me, it would be great. I think. So really, tonight is just to provide you with some tools that can help us have the conversation about ESSER. Last night, as Nancy just suggested, the City Council did meet. The guidance that was given was a 4.5% budget impact. It will be interesting to see how that plays out when all departments, it was a citywide conversation that the councilors' proposal spoke to. Really, it's a bottom line citywide budget. I think there's an expectation that there are pluses and minuses. There are some departments whose needs are going to be greater or different. And he did, in the motion, which I put on the slide, he did call out very specifically the ramp up of the IT department. Here at City Hall. There's a new technology department looking to transition away from contracted services and onto a staffing pattern internal, and that will drive some kind of human capital costs initially that he didn't think should fall under that umbrella of 4.5%. So my first slide, which you'll see in a moment, takes you back to it's okay. It takes you back to the beginning, right? And it just says, look, our current budget, if you went to the most recent summary document that we're looking at in your budget book, our current budget's a little bit better than 58 million after it's been adjusted for the negotiating dollars that were transferred in. Our continuing services analysis that we did drove that budget up by 4.1%. It included our health and other benefits. Here we go. Our budget is driven up by health and dental and our workers' comp and property and liability. All of our collective bargaining agreement impacts for the current level of staffing, and it included special education increases in the area of tuitions and transportation for our out-of-district placements. It included bus contract growth in both special needs and regular transportation. It included significant energy costs as we are on board with the city, and they negotiated our costs for the commodity supply of electricity and gas. That continuing services budget also included 1.16 FTEs of new positions. The 1.0 is a special ed case manager at the elementary level that we hired because when Jeanette came to us last cycle, Steve and George and I had sat and we said, really, you can only have one, but ultimately they really did need the two that she had asked for. So that position ultimately was brought on board. We added that position to meet that changing need, so we recognize it here. It's not an increase to staffing that we currently have. It just recognizes that off-budget hire that we had to do. The 0.16 is simply that on the books that I inherited, we were carrying 2 part-time teachers at the high school who both were 83%ers, but on the books, it looks like in your budget book, it looks like 75%. the money is 83%, so they were getting paid and the full cost is there, but the FTE isn't. And FTEs are really big in the Portsmouth conversation, so this is a no-cost mea culpa. That number ought to be higher by 0.16, so we add that for no cost. It's included in that 4.1. Then in our proposal, you'll remember that we have made reductions of a vacant half-time position that was a central office kind of district-wide role, and then one teaching position at Little Harbor. That, combined with some other increases that were requested, nets us a savings of just under $61,000, which brought our, right now in your binder, proposed budget to a 3.99% increase. It's a $2.3 million increase, and it's a net reduction of a third of an FTE. Okay, so that's where we've been, that's what's in your book. But the conversations we've been having have been a lot about these ESSER positions as as a major priority for any changes we might make beyond this. Matt, your next slide, if you would, please, speaks to that guidance. Councilor Tabor put the motion in. There's the actual motion clipped from the agenda. He made comments about the nearly $4 million in one-time revenues that we enjoyed in this current FY23 cycle that we're not able to easily replace in the next cycle. Made comments about the inflationary pressures in our economy, and also talked about the new costs of recent and upcoming negotiations that are driving. And so 4.5 is the number that the city was given guidance, and we met this morning with the city manager here in this room, and she passed that guidance forward to all of the departments. So.
But it says a guideline, it doesn't say it's a definite number.
That's
It's not definite.
spoken by the former city councilor. I won't argue with you.
I watched the meeting, and I'm just curious, it didn't seem to be fully addressed last night, but if all our city labor contracts are going up like 5 and 6, and that's the biggest chunk of our budget, we're not really talking about an increase.
Right.
And I don't get the sense that that's being communicated. I mean, we're really talking about cuts across all of the departments if we're holding it to 4.5. Did that,
So
I didn't hear that in what people were talking about.
So I think
It felt like an odd framing to me.
So I guess I would answer that by suggesting that most of the 5-6% increases that you're talking about were realized in the current FY23 budget. And so,
Okay.
And so the inflationary impact of cost of living in next cycle looks, again, in many, many cases, there are police and fire units that are negotiating this year for next. We're negotiating this year for paras for next. But across the board, all of those that are in place are still, I think, by and large, working with that same 10-year rolling cost of living, that COLA, with a floor of 2. Some of them, in our case, we voted some that now have a floor of 3 and still have a ceiling of 5. So moving forward to next year, I don't think we're seeing a lot of 6% impacts.
Okay.
We're seeing the traditional step increases that are built into the contracts and a cost of living that, for the schools, there's a lot of 3. And I think because it's the same negotiator, I think we were seeing that in many of the other units that were at the table last cycle. So most of
That's
that
helpful.
most of that hit was in this year. So
Okay.
there are 5 positions, and my slide didn't weather the transition from one to the next. I'm sorry that doesn't line up. It probably doesn't bother anybody else as much as it bothers me that doesn't line up. The 5 positions are out there: the social work position, the math tutor at the middle school, the counselor at the middle school, the elementary outdoor ed position, and the math interventionist at the high school. These numbers look a little different than numbers we've talked about in the past. Did you say this already? This is total comp. Really.
Yeah, so, and I think that Nathan and I have been having a lot of conversations about this, that I think that it sounds like the tradition in the past in Portsmouth has been to talk about salary when we're talking about people, but the reality is that, it costs more than salary to employ people you employ. So I think, going forward, what we've been talking about is that probably a fairer way and a more appropriate way to think about people is total compensation. What's the benefits cost? What are all the associated costs with these positions? So these will look, if you've been in previous cycles, it sounds like these will look like much larger numbers to you, but this in reality, this is what it really costs to employ folks.
If I stepped aside and did the unthinkable and talked about something else for just another moment, our health insurance, the way we budget for health, we've talked about this in the past, has been for some number of years, because of the creation, a very insightful decision, I think, that was made to create a stabilization fund for health insurance costs. our year-over-year budget change has been a 10-year rolling average of the rate increases of health. What I would argue has not been included has been adjustments for the addition of more lives, more covered bodies, more, not just somebody got married and went from a single to a two-person, or had a child and went to a family, but we added positions, and there was no artificial increase of the base amount. So the rate didn't change to keep up with headcount, it only changed to reflect a rolling average of rate increases, which isn't enough. And so we are behind now. And so not only has this been past practice for both Zach and I in other places, but we're not budgeting enough to cover what we spend each year as we can make our contribution to the stabilization fund. So the stabilization fund, which has a healthy balance, can't blame that healthy balance on us, because we're drawing down now more than we're putting in. So as we move forward, one of the things that we have to start to do is, when we add a new position to the general fund, we have to add money to the health line and dental lines to keep up with those. And there may have been times when they did do that in the past. I can't speak to all of it. I just know in the recent years, we only talking salary and taxes and retirement, and that's fallen behind. So these numbers will look bigger, but we've got to start making sure that we allow some additional budgetary impact for new positions.
Is it only health and dental, or what about the retirement?
It's really only health that's in that stabilization fund, and across the board, our budget does, right now, we're well budgeted for dental, and we're well budgeted for the taxes and the New Hampshire retirement.
But I think there is, long-term, I don't, the city is not looking for us to adjust, the stabilization fund is fine, but I think structurally, long-term, there's a conversation to be had about how do we contribute at a higher rate to the stabilization fund than we are right now. But we're not hearing so far that that's an expectation this year.
But the reality is, if you add 5 bodies and they all take a family medical and it's $20,000+ each, that's $100,000 that health insurance is going to spend that we didn't add into the kitty, and so that just explains that number. You'll start to see numbers that look bigger, but it's not. None of these people are making $150,000.
And that's important for people at home to know.
Yeah, that's important for everybody watching.
It's not a salary only number.
Yeah, this is salary, federal taxes, FICA, Medicare. It's the New Hampshire retirement impact. It's health and dental included.
Okay.
So those are the positions.
Hope has a question on this slide.
Okay.
Oh, so I'm just curious about the math intervention salary. I mean, we have qualified math teachers that are teaching multiple classes at a much lower salary than that. So what are we basing that salary on? That's a pretty hefty salary for an interventionist.
So
That salary, that whole total compensation is based on the person in the position, based on how that person landed on the salary schedule of the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers, both years of experience and advanced degrees that the person carries.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
What's your rate? What's the rate calculation for benefits?
Actual. So you want to know how much?
The percentage is that we were given?
No, like that's.
what's the cost of like a family plan?
That's a family. I've got
Somebody carries a
the family 2-person, like whatever they're taking right now that I'm literally going to shift into the budget is what I've got in there. This isn't baked. I didn't just do a rough. The reason that the numbers changed from what you might have seen before to this is because before I had used a 2-person down the line for everybody, and I'd used.
And what? Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So in this case, I've tweaked them to make sure that I'm really moving the right dollar if I do this.
And I think, too, when we have these conversations, we're a little vague about what the breakdown, because these are singular positions.
Right.
We're singular identifiable
With faces,
people.
yeah.
So we're a little vague on our side about what chunk in any one position is salary versus your health insurance, for obvious reasons. We don't want, it's private information as to whether or not you have a family plan or a individual plan.
It's in the binder, though. It looks like I just randomly turned to the page that has the monthly rates for the plans here, too.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking there was more like an overall, like an FNA rate or like a something that, but I'm just in a different context.
Yeah, no, and I know exactly what you mean, and I would use a number if I would have a different number pegged to support staff than I would to the professional staff. But in this case, I'm looking at, and I can dial back to you and get you just plug numbers that we would use.
Yeah,
but-
well, I mean, I guess I was thinking more of it from a perspective, and I totally understand the actual, but if you're, even, with grants and whatever that you're doing, if you have a rate calculation and you want to put it up 1%, overall, but it's typically the same for all staff that are, do you know what I'm saying? So like you're talking about the saving into the stabilization fund. I feel like usually that's done with an overall benefit rate that becomes standardized. Do you know what I'm
In
saying?
future periods, if we said, oh, and then next year we'd like to hire a teacher, I would have a plug, yes, that I would suggest, and this amount we'll add for every new position to health. In this case, we're a
Looking
little-
at specific
we're down the
jobs.
road, and so I know better. In this scenario, I would not be generating enough dollars for the health because I would not have assumed correctly. I won't say anyway. I mean, how am I doing?
It's a hard one.
Keep moving.
These are specific jobs. I mean,
Right.
you're tailoring it to the specific job. Okay.
Because
You haven't changed the whole budget to reflect everything, each position, including benefits, correct? Like, if I look through this whole budget book, it's not gonna look similar to this, right?
No.
This
No.
is just for the ESSER purposes.
this is because we're talking about potentially moving one or more of these out of ESSER and adding them to your budget for next year. So I wanted to have as close to a real number as I could that you need to move over if you make that decision.
Okay.
Okay, continue.
Matt, take it away. So, given that these positions exist, we've been working on scenarios, and we've got 4 proposals for you, and we'll summarize at the end. The first proposal is,
Is that written anywhere besides up there?
I have slides for you, so you don't have to write this all down.
Okay.
I'll set you up. Yep. So the first proposal is, leave it right like it is in your binder. It was a good plan. It's 3.99 Walmart pricing, so it's 4% against a city expectation that's going to be 4.5%. It is a reduction of a third of an FTE, which we don't have to celebrate necessarily, but it provides for all of our continuing services. It certainly would set us up in a very comfortable position moving forward to the deliberation of the city council on the full budget. So that's the current proposed budget that you have in the book. Proposal number 2 validates that 2 positions that we're currently funding in ESSER were in our general fund request last year at this time, or not this time, but in May when we went to the city council. And ultimately, because of the concern for the total number of positions being added or requested for addition across the city, we shifted these 2 positions out of the general fund request, said we would fund them in ESSER, and told the city council that night, we will bring them back next cycle. I mean, these are not experiments. These are positions that we need. And so we propose in proposal number 2 that those 2 positions be added to the general fund budget for next year. The costs represent just under $220,000, and by themselves are a budget increase of 0.38%. As a result, you'd be looking at a 4.37% increase, and your total change of FTEs would be an increase of 1.66, 1 2/3. So proposal 1, leave it like we stand right now with the proposal. Proposal 2, move these 2. Proposal number 3, thank you, Matt. Proposal number 3 takes that and adds the social worker position. I can't anything but echo all of the celebration and praise that has been heaped on this individual and this role and what it's been able to provide for students. And so, that's proposal 4. We jumped. Go back to 3. Thank you very much. We add the social worker position. That now jumps us to $375,000 of new money and a budget increase of 0.65.
Social worker also got cut by the council.
It's been in ESSER. It never, it
It got pushed out of the local request.
before we
into
got to
federal money.
council.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, before we got to
That's-
council, it
clear,
was,
but
yeah.
That's my
But
understanding.
Nathan, where are we taking into consideration the fact that our social workers now are able to get rebates on Medicaid and whatnot? Like, is their compensation being like, we're not, in these numbers, it doesn't seem to be taking into consideration that we could bill insurance on some of these social work positions, correct? So, I mean, that could sort of go back into the fund.
If not, I mean, obviously, we can't bill Medicaid if we are funding them from ESSER because it double dips on federal, but certainly.
So why not?
We
Yeah,
could choose,
better
we could choose
argument.
alternatively. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you can, I don't know enough to on the
estimate
fly, to estimate how
revenues
much
on
of
it.
that person I can generate, revenues from. But I do believe you're correct that social workers are in the category, which is a dwindling category for us, because paras used to be in and now they're not, and there's a lot of things that have challenged our ability to generate reimbursements through Medicaid to schools. But that's certainly part of a conversation that we could use, I think, to contemplate future additions of additional, extra social workers, because this one that we've been really pleased with, and ESSER has been funding it since it started.
So are
which
you
was
saying
the
we're not billing Medicaid right now for that social worker
For that
because
one, no.
we're paying them through ESSER? I mean, that just seems, we should just shift another position and put that one. It just seems like it seems backwards that we're doing it like that, and I don't know why we ever made that decision to do that in the first place. I guess.
Well, I guess
Now that I'm thinking of it.
So there's the process of tracking and collecting Medicaid is tedious.
Yeah, but we still do it, and
So-
we're not doing it because of the funding right now. So
Not every function, not every service provided by a social worker would be Medicaid eligible.
Right. So
The
only
entirety of that
certain-
position would not be, and right now, I mean, we do our best to maximize Medicaid reimbursements.
Yeah.
They've been, in the past, they were as high as $600,000-700,000 a year. With all of the new rules, they've fallen down into the $200,000 to $300,000 range. But I would lean into Jeanette Souther, our People Services Director, and her admin, who manage the Medicaid to schools for us, and they could give us some guidance on that. But I think we certainly could look in that direction. But the way that position was envisioned, I don't think that it was a layup, that it was all.
Well, and I think
Yeah, I
that
feel like
the
it-
other piece to it too is once you get into, I'll even use the term chasing, but is when you're trying to align, instead of just chasing, when you're trying to align services to what's Medicaid reimbursable, it changes what the person can do in a lot of ways. And I think some of the magic of what's been happening right now is it's just been what do we actually need, not what will Medicaid pay for.
Yeah.
So
But
I mean that's the other piece. But I hear you.
Still
If
shooting
there's money
ourselves in the
there,
foot
we
a
should
little
take
bit
advantage
here.
of it.
okay, all right, thanks.
So add the social worker and the position, the impact now is 0.65 overall. Your budget's at 4.6% and 2.66 FTEs. And then the last proposal that we put before you would be to shift all 5 of those positions we just talked about, which is collectively $638,000 and brings your budget increase to 5.1%. And it's 4.66 on the FTE increase, the 5 netting out against the 1/3 reduction that we had. So, the next slide, just.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Can we stay on this first? Just 1 second. Sorry.
Go ahead, Liz.
Or go. No, I just wanted to say if you could just stay on this slide.
Nathan, you have paper copies for people, right?
Yeah, no, go ahead. You can go ahead now. I just wanted to write those numbers down. Sorry.
So, next page just stacks the proposals up against themselves, and again, whatever the migration,
It's your knack.
all the migration from the back to the PC or whatever it is drives me nuts that those are not, Brian, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I like having these options because one of the things I'm concerned with next year is we bringing these all in, we actually get a 5.1% hit automatically, right?
Right.
And that's essentially what we're saying.
Yep.
For if we want to bring these positions in and not add anything. So if we can spread it over 2 years, it seems like it's much more palatable way to get these positions rolled in.
Last year and this year.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 positions in this year, staying, and then, it'd still have to be almost 4.5% essentially
Yep.
next year in order to roll in the other positions, as opposed to a 5.1% hit now or next year. But that, to me, and this was what I was asking for before. I think this is a lot more reasonable than trying to kick the can down the road. If we can split the difference somehow.
I think when we were having conversations, about budgeting in general, we're always, my mantra with everybody is always long game, long game. So it's not just right now, it's what's the ripple over the next 3 to 5. And what I don't want to have is, as a result of choices, what I would prefer to avoid is a result of choices we're making now, we roll into next year, and we're making some some large-scale reductions in order to scramble to try to make it work. I'm always cautious about that. I'd rather be conservative in terms of the way we think about it.
Carrie, and then Liz, and then Lisa.
I think I agree with the rationale of making cuts. I guess I maybe disagree on the method. And I think because and I'm very surprised at this, guidance from the city on increased percent and things like that. But I guess I worry that if they aren't shifted, then the idea, I guess if we're not asking to shift those positions, I see it as resulting in cuts later on. Not, don't ask for it now because we can, and I think that, but I also worry about how we've set with this. I guess it's really important to me that when we talk about the 3.99 as a spot that we're okay with, it's minimizing the fact that inevitably that will mean next year there's going to be cuts. And so I feel like we just need to think about how we're presenting it and talking about it, because to shift 4 positions in 1 year is going to be 6% or whatever it was, 5, another percent. And so I think the meeting in the middle for sustainability is really important.
So which proposal would you support?
I would say number 2, but 2B, which would be, I do like the idea of switching the social worker and seeing if that works into billing and things like that, because it can be reimbursable as opposed to one of the other positions. So proposal 5. Sorry, Nathan.
Okay, you made up your own proposal.
We could have had 12 of them up there. So these are, there's. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Liz.
Just 2 things, and I may have missed it. I apologize that I haven't been in the past meetings. I did have COVID, and then I have a sinus infection right now, so I was on vacation, so I apologize there. But how much money do we have left for ESSER? I mean, we have these numbers down at the bottom. Are we on deadlines? Are we going to do we need to get stuff in? I don't know if we've already talked about that, so I apologize if I missed it. But are these the maxed out numbers at the bottom, or what am I looking at here?
What you're looking at is a listing that shows what was spent in 22,
Yeah.
what we're working on spending in 23, what we expect we'll spend in 24, and then some infrastructure projects at the bottom. And none of that is, obviously, the stuff that we did in 22, that's locked and loaded, that is what it is. And the greatest chunk of what we're doing in 23 is kind of committed, because we're working it, we employ these people and we're
Yeah.
doing it. Those things that will be charged into ESSER 2, likely. I mean,
Okay.
that's my suggestion right now. That which we could fund out of ESSER 2, which has a deadline of September of this year, 23, are in the pink column. Those things that need to go or could be charged into ESSER 3 are either in green or blue, depending on whether they will satisfy our obligation to set aside 20% for learning loss, or they will not necessarily meet that expectation and will be just in that fund. So the 3 numbers across the bottom add up to the number by your left hand, which
Yeah.
is 3.9, which you can compare to the number up on line 3 of the document, which is the total amount of federal funding that we're trying to spend.
Okay.
Right now, this is a roadmap for how we're going to spend the total. The pink column has a September 23 deadline, and the green and blue collectively have a September 24 deadline.
Okay. And so this number on the line 3 up top here,
Yep.
this 3,990,000, that's the combo of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 that we have available to us.
Yep.
This 20%, is that part of that number?
It's 20% of line 2.
Okay, so this 20% isn't in addition to line
No, it's
3.
included
It's
in.
included in line
It
3.
has to be compared against the green column down below.
Okay, so, I mean, in my experience, last year doing budget for the first time, we went to the city council, and city council said, okay, that's great, but we're going to ask everybody after they give us our budget to take out, cut, a couple positions or cut back this amount, and you and Steve and made some decisions to, propose, and this is what we're going to cut back. So my concern is that we settle right here. We're going to have the same ask this year when we walk in, even though they were so generous last year. It's going to be the same, similar thing. And so I think right now, we need to go all in. And when they ask us to dial back, we can dial back to step 2 or step 3. But right now, I'm all in. I'm at 4.
Number 4?
Yes,
I
yes.
think the
Nancy.
only, my concern with 4, and I appreciate, look, we'll take, you want to give us more resources to do stuff, we'll take it. My concern with 4 is, we don't know, when did they finalize the city budget last year?
End of June.
Second,
June.
third, sixth.
So we're already through hiring season. We've already made a bunch of operational decisions and we're rolling. So it's not, and I think Nathan and I were talking about this today, the decision to kind of, the go for it decision, there's inherent risk in it. And the risk, and you can look at it as, you can look at it on one level and be like, this is risk free. We ask for X, Y, and Z, they don't give it to us, whatever, we're just moving on. The reality is it's not risk free because there are operational impacts that happen, because we have rolled forward assuming that what you're going to give us is going to go through. And we're starting to make decisions as we roll in, because July 1, we're into that new year. We're already making decisions, we're booking vendors, we're doing all kinds of different things, we're making choices about who we're hiring. And then if that changes and the city pulls back, says, well, we're going to only allow you, we're going to cut $150,000, $200,000 out of what it is that you asked from us, then we're in scramble mode a little bit. And it depends on what choices we've already made. So I just wanted to say it's not a neutral risk. There are risks involved in the city making decisions very late in the game for us that we would have to respond to.
And where is the community campus funds falling in all of this? Wasn't that supposed to be part of ESSER? Or some part of
It's
ESSER?
in,
Oh, no, so all right, so over the last year, we
Yeah.
have,
All right, Liz, that's a
Alright.
question that we've addressed in a previous
Okay,
meeting, so
I'll
you're going to have to
take a look.
watch the video
so
because
we've shifted.
you missed
we've
a lot of
shifted,
them.
They've purchased it, we've shifted 1.5 million of window projects
Yeah.
that we think are most compliant with the structure of ESSER.
Yeah.
We'll do the Little Harbor and Dondero window out of the ESSER funds, and we'll use the 1.5 million that the project had, the capital improvement plan had for those, and we'll invest that in the Lister renovation over at Community Campus. And then we have a $2 million placeholder in the CIP request this year, while we continue to work with the architect engineers, and we're working on finding a construction management partner to help us put together an estimate about exactly how much. There's about 12,000 square feet there, and the industry has been telling us $300 a square foot, which would put our estimate at something like 3.6 million. There are those among us who just don't believe that this existing building with existing mechanicals and such is going to cost $300 a square foot. So we're hoping that that number will fall, and we'll be able to go back to the city and ask for them to give us that repurposed 1.5 million that was going to be for windows that we'll now use, plus something less than the 2 million to cobble together and make this project happen at the community campus to fit that out.
Okay, thank you. Lisa?
I guess I would say just broadly, I really agree with Brian and Carrie in terms of just trying to protect some of the positions that the council did promise us we would have back. I mean, I don't look at those positions that they asked us to remove and they promised to return as adding FTEs. I look at that as them making good on a commitment that they made to us. And I would say broadly that when we talked about ESSER from the beginning with our administrators, with our community members, people have consistently said we're concerned about learning loss and we're concerned about mental health. So I really just feel like if our main job here is to honor that, and certainly when our admins have come in and they've talked about, we're seeing issues with behavior, we're seeing in the scores, and we're seeing in which kids need intervention, that there's a real need there. Like, these aren't sort of like made up pie in the sky, ooh, it would be really fun to have a spare, math teacher. I mean, this is a real acute need. So I just want to keep that in the conversation. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Zach, about if we go to, all the way to 4, is that going to create operational challenges if they push back? I almost wonder if we think about, is outdoor ed the same thing as a math tutor? And I'm not trying to make a value judgment about which is more important, but we have somebody there who's going to be on leave, and that's a little bit in flux next year anyway, if I understand it. So I'm just curious about if we really go to the for the math support and the social worker and the counselors. I think that's where hypothetically I would land,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah, I would agree.
Do you want to speak?
No, I would just say that because the outdoor education, I say let it go.
And put in the other ones.
Yeah.
Lisa, do you want to put your name on a number?
Well, I mean, are we making the numbers? We
Well,
have
we-
several more budget workshops. Are we actually doing this
We could
tonight?
decide tonight about how we're going to do the
It'd be
ESSER,
nice to
but-
know where your head's at.
Yeah,
I mean, I would love to say 4, but I feel like I would like to, at a minimum, try to draw a line around 3. I mean, I get it if that's too far for you, Zach, operationally, but
I think there's a lot, I totally understand the rationale.
I mean, those positions are just really badly needed.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I can totally see the rationale around 3. I think there's, and I think we're pretty darn close to what the council put out too. So I think we look pretty responsible. We push back in the things that we were talking about before, the things that you felt like you were previously promised. I think it's fair to be back and say, here we are back. We said we were going to be back. We're back with those things, and I'll acknowledge. I mean, I was part of the push around some of the things we want to continue to experiment with, and it's okay to experiment in ESSER. But I really feel like the results of what we've seen over in connection with the social worker position in terms of adding capacity around the kind of the mental health needs and the connective tissue to other organizations and stuff. I feel like we don't need any additional more time to evaluate that. It's like, that's a lock. I feel like we should just
It's
do
been
that.
amazing.
Yeah, and if anything, there's going to be, there will be a conversation as we move forward in the future about how do we expand that type of capacity in other places in the district. So for me, I'm open to a lot of different things, but I do feel like 3, I can totally see the rationale behind the positions that are involved in 3.
Okay, Margot.
I was going to say something very similar because I look at 3 as it's the 2 we said we were going to come back for, and philosophically, it's the school department saying we are fully committed to the value. Not that none of these apply value, but for the when you ask us to think about the long game,
Yep.
the long game is this is a model that's working. Let's commit to it. The reason why actually I'm not a fan of 4. And I can't believe I'm the one saying this out loud, given everybody knows what I stand for, is I have a very hard time rolling a position in a program that we have all agreed as a board is not planned out well yet, which is our outdoor ed program. And so until we see a plan that's going to address equity and opportunity, I am fine with leaving that in ESSER because I don't think we're ready as a board to commit to that on a long term. I wish we were. But how it is right now is not accomplishing those core values that we as a board cherish. So I would favor 3 over 4.
And it allows, and it's not going away, it would just stay in ESSER.
It allows us
So
to
it allows it to
marinate-
breathe some
exactly.
more and to find, and see if it can find its legs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sort of gives it a nice time frame of it has to find the legs by a certain length of time or.
Really, it's about
tried.
this time next year. is
Right,
kind of the
that, so I like that from a philosophical, it speaks to our values and our needs. So I'm at 3.
Brian.
Just an observation too on top of this. I mean, I didn't never put a fine number on it, but I was also right at 3. I think that's the right. Those are the right positions. Also, I think it, basically opens up room for again additional acute needs. If we're going to take some of these out of ESSER,
That's right.
do we need additional math interventionists at another school or something? Because I think, and that's a legit one-year ask, right? With learning loss or mental health needs or whatever. I think certainly that's a good use of ESSER for acute needs that we hope are long-term on some of these things, but these ones, I just think we should commit to these.
Let's not miss Hope when she,
Nancy?
Yes, Hope.
Can I jump in the conversation before we go around again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to echo a couple of things that I'm hearing. I've said before, and I'll say again, I'm concerned with us coming now days out the gate at 4.0, 4.1 with, special ed needs that we have to meet, and then retirement and medical needs that we also have to meet. So I think EMS positions desperately needed. I mean, having kids gone through that school in recent years in the pandemic, I can speak directly to the need for the math support and counseling and social work, and those needs just got greater after the pandemic. And I think that EMS has done a great job in showing direct student impact and having those positions. They piloted the math program for a year before they brought it to us in other ways. And so I think we've seen a direct correlation and impact of having that math intervention at PMS, as well as now at PHS. So for me, looking at proposal 3, I have concerns that there's not the PHS math position in that. So I would support an addendum to proposal 3, or I would support proposal 4 with the addendum of pulling the elementary outdoor ed position. And the reason I say that is because I do echo Marco in that I think allowing that outdoor ed one more year to kind of percolate can be very beneficial to our district. I think from a value standpoint, sometimes with budgets, we do have to make value judgments. And when I look at a core class like math and how we standardize test our kids around math and around English, and how we are ourselves reviewed for funding around math and English scores, I think those are crucial points within our district that our students need that support, and we clearly can make the case for support around counselors and social workers that have been seen. So I would like to see variation put on the table with the 2 math supports, the social worker and the counselor, but would give on the elementary ed. I think that can wait another year, can stay in ESSER and be moved out another year. I do have a question around the English teacher, the 83% to 100%, number 8 on the green sheet. Is that something that needs to truly be considered for this year as well as moving to 100%? How is that impacting the high school students?
So
What are we looking at?
The green sheet.
we
Number 8.
circled back around,
Okay.
Hope, just to confirm what we thought was already the case based on our previous conversations. And high school administration confirmed they felt that we could comfortably cover ELA needs and requests from students in the upcoming year, and without the extension of this.
So Hope, can I just?
I would like to echo comments. I think Lisa and Brian made the comment around, we did make a point of letting them know that we were bringing those positions back. So I agree that we're already making concessions in other areas of our budget. I think we just need to ask for what we crucially need. And I appreciate their guidelines, but I'm in Nancy's corner. That is the guideline. And, I just think going forward, the city council is going to need to expect that our budget's going to sit closer to 4 or 5 pretty easily around growing costs in special ed and retirement and medical costs being tacked on out the gate.
So, Hope, can I just, so you'd like proposal 3, but added to proposal 3 would be the PHS math interventionalist position, correct?
so proposal number 5.
3.5.
Right, all right. What,
Or
can you tell,
3B.
3.5.
3.5.
3B, yeah.
3.5.
Nathan, can
Yes.
you tell us
I certainly can. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Hope.
trying to answer Nancy's question. Yes, Nancy, that either that or it is proposal 4 with the removal of the
Outdoor,
elementary.
okay, so whatever way.
Same.
Calling it.
So, Hope, check your email. Both of these documents are with you now.
I just wanted to say that I have that slide before me. So by me proposing, it probably sets the numbers a little closer to the proposal 4, somewhere in between 3 and 4.
Right.
Can you figure
So,
that out?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the proposal that we're talking about, which would shift 4 positions over from ESSER, but not the outdoor ed.
Correct.
Would leave that in ESSER for another year, would be 4.88% increase.
Okay, that's
And
good.
a net increase of your FTEs of 3.66.
Which really, 2 of those we said we'd come back for,
So it's
Two
really
of
only a
those-
net increase of,
1.66.
right.
Right. And so what would the total, do we have to have the total $1 million number?
Now, because I've still got to tweak you a little bit on a couple of things.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. So we,
Can you repeat that number again, please?
Yeah, 4.88%.
Okay.
and let's label that proposal
And-
3B,
well,
just
and
so
three-
we're all on the same.
And you got, Hope, the 3.66 total FTE change with the, in parentheses, 1.66 if we're saying the council owes us 2 from last year anyways.
Okay, we're going to call that
Yeah.
proposal 3B or
That's
the
with
Hope
the-
proposal.
Yeah, removal of the outdoor ed is what I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Okay.
got that.
Oh, that was
And
Margot's idea.
I'll leave it to the parents if who wants to cut math and counselor positions. I'll leave that to the parents to speak up about.
Pip, thank you, Hope. Pip,
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad that Hope just spoke before me because I was, most of what I wanted to say has already been said, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I agree with the notion that we need to, I agree with Margot, what Margot said about the notion that we need to develop the outdoor ed program a little bit more. I'm really nervous about agreeing to that because I feel like that position was one of the sort of innovations that COVID forced on us, and I love that because I think it happened sort of naturally because we had been talking about that kind of thing for a long time, and then we were moved into it more quickly than I think we expected to be. But it worries me. It worries me not to include it in our budget because I think it could get lost. So I just want to note that and hope that we can really put some time and energy into building a plan around that so that we don't just lose sight of it quickly and lose some of the momentum that we have had.
I would say an important thing for me to, I think, to just add in terms of that thought process is, I think having a full year and a half under my belt as we move into the second wave of this, I think we'll have a fuller evaluation of all the different positions that are in the district, and there's a lot of positions. So I don't think as we roll into the next budget season, it's exclusively hey, everything we've already done before is a lockbox, and that's staying right where it is. And now there's this appendage, which is outdoor edge, and that's the only thing we really need to talk about. I think there'll be more stuff in play. Also, as we go into next year too, if we have pending retirements and those types of things, we might be re-examining some positions as we know people are going to be exiting. So I hear what you're saying, and I think the dynamic won't be exactly what I said. Here's everything we're already doing and outdoor ed. I think it'll be more fluid than that when we come into next year's conversation.
Good. And the reason I mentioned going after Hope is because I'm in full agreement with proposal 3B. I think that's probably the way to go. I think I wanted to point out that we have to remember that even though the city council has told us what their hope and expectation is, that we are here to advocate for the schools and for what we believe is best and necessary for our students and our staff. So that's what I think we can do with 3B.
Okay. Ann?
I was wondering, do we have any information about upcoming retirements? We often do at this time of year.
I don't. I think there's been some. I don't have immediate ones that would immediately put certain positions up for consideration. I'll say that. But I'm happy to come back to you with a fuller conversation soon.
Thank you. Liz?
Just to clarify, so similar to the social work position receiving Medicaid reimbursement and not being able to do that under ESSER, if the math tutor position and the math interventionist position were not under ESSER, did they get some sort of, how do I say this? So I assume those positions are working with kids that might have 504s and IEPs. Is there federal reimbursement?
No.
They're not working with any children that have a fall under
They're
a
not
504
exclusively for those
Not
purposes.
exclusive.
So it might be that you're a student that just so happens to have an IEP or a 504, but the design of these positions are not to specifically fulfill IEP goals.
Okay. So do we, but is there like some sort of provision in ESSER where we lose special ed funding if the position or anything is going through ESSER? Like, I guess, I don't know.
This isn't a special ed position.
No, I understand that, but I guess if a teacher or if somebody is providing IEP or 504 services, like how do we get reimbursed for special ed? Is that just a general reimbursement or percentage for special education, or based on a child needing residential, or how does that, we get federal reimbursement for special ed, right? So, or state reimbursement or some,
Well,
it's a
there,
federal
so
to
there are,
state?
there are two programs that I think I could talk about with regard to special ed. One is, we do have a federal IDEA,
Grant?
they still call it IDEA, but it's the federal IDEA grant, which is
Yeah.
a special ed services grant. We have 6 teaching positions that are funded through IDEA,
Okay.
have had for years. I will tell you that as our teacher salaries grow, and as the IDEA grant shrinks, we've been shifting and putting some of the cheaper, some of the less experienced teachers who are lower on the scale, we push them into the IDEA grant and move the more expensive teacher into the district, because eventually, and we're close to that, probably we'll have to go back to 5 positions, but IDEA funds that with some small dollars provided out of that grant to cover the individual who, she does out of district, we call her the,
I know.
He's not a district placement
like an
coordinator.
out of district coordinator. I mean, she does. She's contracted. She's not a full-time employee, but so with some funds for that. The second is we used to call it catastrophic aid. Our catastrophic cases, which don't have to be, but are generally our out-of-district placements whose costs rise beyond certain levels. There is a cost-sharing arrangement where the state refunds to us or reimburses us in the next year, in the subsequent period. So for costs that we had this year, for the most expensive, and the formula, the numbers have tweaked just a bit, but generally speaking, we have to plan on covering the first 50, totally about 80,000 or almost 100,000 now out of pocket. We have to pay everything, but we are obligated and responsible for a certain amount, and then the qualified expenditures having been reviewed by the state, they will reimburse us next year for some of those costs this year.
So
But it's
nothing
not-
that we would be throwing into ESSER would end up doing similar to the Medicaid where we can't double bill or anything like that. I guess the double, I guess I think that's an argument that we need to make, is that, moving the social worker position into 3.5, if that's what we decide on doing, and creating this FTE and a uptick in percentage, there is a slight reimbursement there. So, I mean, I don't know. So I guess I was curious how some of these other intervention positions, I mean, obviously ESSER was created to create these interventions, but if we could get any sort of special education funding, I don't want to double book,
My experience with the school department is, Liz, it's always been very on top of how you bill Medicaid, and some kids are eligible for Medicare. My son was eligible for Medicare when he was in high school.
Yeah.
Medicaid and Medicare. So our school department has always been on top of it. And
No, but
as
I guess
Nathan said,
we
years
haven't
ago,
been
we
on
used to
with
get
this, so-
$700,000 a year. Now it's, because they keep cutting back, it's $200,000 a year. So I think we just have to have some faith. And if you want to have a separate conversation with Nathan about it, fine, but this isn't the time to talk
No,
about it.
I just wanted to make sure the math intervention and the
Right,
math tutor
it's-
positions weren't situations where we could be getting
It
some other
appears
federal
no,
reimbursement
no,
or we're getting blocked
no.
by using it. As
We
ESSER. That's
cannot,
the only
we cannot get that
answer I was looking
reimbursement.
for.
Okay, Carrie, and then Hope has another question too.
I was just curious, and sort of more in the pitching 3B or wherever we land within City Council. And I was here for some of the ESSER conversations, but is did we decide that the refitting cannot be ESSER? Absolutely.
No, we didn't decide that it absolutely couldn't. What we did face was that over the course of the city's deliberations and legal exploration about using ARPA, because ESSER 3 is
Right.
the ARPA grant, or the ARPA Act, they were looking at using some of their ARPA funds, and they wanted $2 million. They invited us to contribute $2 million of our ARPA funds to that purpose. One of the concerns was the long-lasting tentacles of federal dollars if we were to, at some point in the future, sell that building off or dedicate it to other social service purposes and it not be serving the intent that the federal grants had provided for. So we all, I think, collectively, looking for guidance from the federal government and the state government as a go-between for us at least, we all got very uncomfortable that the requirements might make that a bad idea. So it's not that we couldn't, and we certainly could still think if we wanted to about finding some elements of it to come out of this, but that was when the windows and air, certainly it was a layup for ESSER. And so we said, let's switch those around and use the local dollars to do the fit out instead.
So would it be fair to say, City Council, we are proposing a 4.88 increase, but by the way, we're going to come to you with another $1 million ask, and we think that this increase will offset $400,000. Like, our ask is going to be less for this refitting. We will figure out a way.
How are those related?
I don't.
Yeah, again, that's baked in the CIP, though.
Yeah,
isn't it?
So it's funny being in Portsmouth because, we represent you. So last night we were at the meeting. It was interesting because, there's a lot of things going on in City Council last night, but most importantly, there was a public hearing on the CIP. And so we represent, got to be there, answer questions, and we're asking for millions. I mean, you've renovated your elementary schools, we've put air conditioning in at New Franklin. By the way, there's some paving going on, there's some roofing, there's all of these upgrades, and all of this stuff sits there, and we go and we talk, but even when we're approved, the money flows like the city. I go downstairs with my little smiley face and say, this is okay to pay, and I hand it to somebody who doesn't work for me upstairs. It's the dollars are managed through the city side, and so it's and so you think about that, like in the normal course of events, you go in and say, what I'm going to give you in one hand, I can let you have a little of, I can do, and yet sometimes the conversation very much with Smiles is, it's all somebody else's money. It's not, so it's hard to wheel and deal like that because of the way that the buckets are broken out. But I certainly think, I don't want to take any of your time away. It's your conversation, but I'm hearing such good arguments for the positions. And we had these same arguments, but we were endeavoring to try to throw up options that would help you try to find. I said to him at one point when Zach and I were talking about it earlier, should we just go in and say, where do you want to be? 4, 4.25, 4.5, 4. Like, before we even talk about what we're shopping for and what we're choosing, should we start there? But you already know the conversation that you're having and what's on the table. So we just put together some ideas. Your logic.
Glad you did.
Your argument is really good around the
Harry,
table.
do you feel your question was answered?
Yes, I do have one small add, and I don't know if this has been clear. I know that with the outdoor ed piece, one of the things I recall talking about in that conversation was that this was sort of our start, and we wanted to see more positions added across the board, across all levels, big commitment. And so I think just as, and it may come out in strategic planning, it may come out in your work, but it's still an ongoing question. Because if you talked to me last year, I would say we would be adding 2 outdoor ed positions to our budget this year, right? But we're not feeling like that's the point we're at, so just.
Yep. No, that's good.
Takes the right person.
Hope had a question.
Thank you, Lucy. I have 2 questions for Zach.
Yep.
The first one being, Jim, going back to the green sheet, the position number 15, the additional 40% nurse position to address equity, that's not an ESSER, so how will we be able to, what are the equity issues that need to be addressed, and how will we be able to address those if that position is being left right now on the table?
So just to kind of put everything in context, the ask list is composed of things that are coming from principals and then things that are coming from people who are department heads. So we gave you everything in that range. So you had two different requests from the nursing department head. One was a full additional nurse who I think you would be a floater, effectively.
Point four, they were both point four.
I'm sorry.
Just to clarify, yep.
Sorry, thank you. So one would be the enhancement of the position that currently is a .6 at the high school, which would make the person a full-time position at the high school, and the other was a .4 that was a floater that would be like the first line kind of substitute person, could do some additional. I think the way in which it was being discussed, although I think there was a lot we needed to flush out on it, was this idea of kind of helping people make appointments and connect to providers. It almost, as Nathan and I were talking about tonight, I mean, it's almost like a part-time medical social worker kind of role-ish.
Okay.
But it's not, I think it's not totally fleshed out yet. And so there was some, in terms of back to the .4 that would be extension, I'm sorry, the .4 also, there was some discussion of whether or not that would provide some services at Lister, because we currently do not have a full-time nurse at Lister. And we did spend some time tonight. We went back to just kind of reconfirm with Steve at Lister about whether this was an urgent need at the moment, and what we got back was no. They're managing, most of what they do is in connection to distribution of medication, and they have a system for doing that. Similar to other things that are in here, when asked, it's like, well, if you'll give it to me, I'll take it. But not something that was not something that presented a serious representation of inequity for students at Lister per se. Like, students are getting what they need at the moment. So I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit, Hope, but I think you get the kind of. I think these are ideas that. Yeah, they're nice. I think they're good ideas that could use some additional vetting. And fleshing out, and maybe things to consider down the line. But what I got from people in both the buildings where these things were was that these were not immediate needs.
Okay. I mean, I can certainly see that the nurses could probably get very creative in using that position, the extra hours, 1,000 different ways, considering what's on their plates nowadays. But so if you could just bear with me for a moment, I'm going to ask that little ahead, and I know that's something that is not done often in this district. We usually live in our budget in the moment, and what I have found in going through budgets in Fort Smith, in doing that, we kick the can and we shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes, because we're not really thinking always about what positions are still in discussions that are really important to us, like the outdoor ed, like building the world language program. Is that going to be able to continue being built out by sideline funding, or are we going to have to acquire that at some point? I know at the high school there's much talk with our new principal around trying to bring about more focus on art programs, just as much as we do academics, even though academics may be core. Many students do take the path of college and in the arts. And what I have found is that sometimes when we only focus on today, I believe we've been very responsible as a board, at least since I've been a part of this board, but I can say even as a parent beforehand, our school board has always been very responsible to really shade down to the needs. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't allow us to ever build beyond what are just the basic needs of triage for the next year to build out bigger and better programs for our district. So I guess my question to you is, looking at the outdoor ed and knowing that world language has been a conversation for the last 3 years, and nursing needs, some of these other positions that are left on the paper for around art programs and things. What do you see as needing beyond and beyond this year? And the reason I ask that is because we're at the same position every year where we say, okay, we're going to ask, this is what we only need. And I also think it's really important to point out when we go to city council and argue for what we need and they ask us to cut back, and that it's pointed out we really are cutting back. We're cutting back by not bringing you 4 other positions that we really could argue for on these papers, and not building out anything else bigger in some of our programs where we wanted to for many years. So I just would like to understand your vision, because otherwise
Sure.
I feel like we're going to be right back in the position of asking for the basics every single year and never being able to add that maybe 2 or 3 or even 1 extra position that just gives us that creative ability.
Sure. So I think, I got, Nancy just mentioned as you were wrapping up, Hope, she said, you know, it seems like the strategic planning process will help refine some of that a little bit. I mean, I've got some ideas, but I'll tell you that, you know, I think that there are a couple, right now, you've got outdoor ed, which I think we're talking about allowing to continue to, for at least another year to see kind of how that pans out. I think the conversations when I introduced it the first night, I talked about the fact that, and I've talked to the folks associated with Italian, that when it comes to elementary world language, that this proposal would keep things the same way as it is, which means we would have to have a full-time program at the elementary for the upcoming year. We would once again be trying to see what was possible in relation to the Italian consulate or other sources if we were going to, and then we would go another year. Because I think in both cases, both with outdoor education and Italian, there are internally, there's still conversations to be had about how are these things going to be structured, and are they core parts of what we're trying to do overall, and are we willing to give up, other things, not in terms of money, but in terms of time within the school day to have these things be occurring, and what's going to be cut as a result, again, not around the money, but around like time with kids, what's going to be cut in order to allow them to progress in a more robust way. So I think the jury is still out on those 2 questions, and I think this year's proposal allows those things to continue while that analysis continues, and puts us in a position where we're going to be in a much stronger position in terms of our own internal analysis of what is working and what is not in terms of value coming into next year. So I think you're going to have I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I think there's a deeper.
No, you're not.
Okay, I think there needs to be a deeper dive on what we already do, and to what extent those things are worthy of not doing other things. So in addition to asking the council for more funds, the repurposing of the funds that we have is something that we're going to have to look at and be really thoughtful about.
Okay. Liz.
So I guess with that
and
being
Margot.
said, and turning to this green sheet, I mean, I guess it's a little concerning to me that we're obviously talking about ESSER today, and the proposals that we've given, so we're talking about this 3.5, it's gonna bring us up to, 4.88% with 3.66 FTE, but we're totally disregarding this green page and the fact that really ideally what the schools and our teachers are asking us for is 11.52 FTEs, and with an increase of so we're not really being given the option of, okay, keep these positions in ESSER, and instead we'll do an increase in the budget to allow for positions 6 through 16 that were requested, right? So
In the end, you have the option to do whatever you want. Our advice is you don't.
But-
Yeah, so I guess that's
So I
my
think
concern
that's-
is that we're not presenting, we're saying, oh, 3.5 will pull back the outdoor ed, but not only are we pulling back the outdoor ed, but we're pulling back, 11 requests that our schools are asking for, including a case manner paraprofessional, increase the art position that they've been asking for at Don Darrow here.
We know what they are, Liz. We've all looked
Yeah,
at
no,
them
but
many
in the
times.
nursing positions that,
Sometimes that's the value judgments we have to make, Liz, in budget calls.
but then
It's just the reality.
No, I understand that, Hope, but it is, I think I was the one that was called on here. So I guess what I'm saying is as far as having this 40% nursing position, that, Hope, that you just talked about here, I guess I'm a little bit concerned that,
Well, you can make a suggestion to add any of those positions you want, okay? So just keep that in mind. And we've been talking about that through all these budget meetings that we've been
Right.
having,
But-
that you haven't been able to attend. And I know that you have
I understand that,
reasons.
but can any of these go back into ESSER? So I think that's the
They're not in
conversation.
ESSER.
like-
They're
not in ESSER.
No, I know, but is there any way to be able to pull any of these?
They don't qualify under what the conditions for ESSER would be.
And the
I mean, do
administration
they
is
though? Because
advising
I
us
mean,
not
I
to
would
do
think an
that.
art position, if we're talking outdoor ed, an art position would be.
No, 'cause that
or
position was already
an
there
an added
beforehand.
nursing position would fall under something for ESSER too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could talk about a lot of things, but we could talk about a lot of scenarios if you like, but one of the things that we've talked about with this green sheet, and very respectfully, I say, I know that the board is interested in what didn't make the hit list, but when we presented this to the administrative team, I have to call it out, the best example is the Don Darrow principal said, I don't need an extra 20% of art. I need this, this, and this. I don't need that. But that is what the art department head, who works at the middle school, thought would be most important for the district.
And I think made in good faith.
Well,
I mean,
made in
a
good faith,
thing.
great, but we didn't even, because of the process that we went through, these things got listed because we didn't want them to be lost in the conversation, and because specifically in the last cycle, the board had said, we really would be curious to know, where did you come from? Like what, because without that insight, you have no real way to judge what did make the list and why it was a priority against the others.
And I'll just say, and I know Brian wants to jump in, I would just say too that this is a particular snapshot of a particular moment. So this doesn't, in terms of department heads and principals and people along the chain, had a whole bunch of other things people asked for, a whole bunch of stuff. And so we didn't even get what those things are that were decisions that the people we pay to supervise beneath us made decisions about what to bring to us. We're just saying, these are the things, and this is a combination of, again, principals, directors, so Lister and Jeanette, but also department heads in a whole bunch of, art department, PE department, like whatever. This also is at that tier. So in many cases, you had things that maybe a department head who may operate K-12, they might operate 6-12. We have a whole bunch of different structures. Those people said, I'm interested in doing certain things. In many cases, principals were like, that's great, and just what Nathan said, that's great that this particular department would like to have this thing, but I can think of 5 more things I want before that, and I'm not asking for them as a building principal.
We left them all in the parking lot because we didn't want to lose sight of
But
them.
you had asked for something, and we tried to give it to you. I'm sorry, Brian.
Okay, we're going to go to Margot and Brian, and then I think maybe we
That's
can
exactly what I was going to say.
sum this up.
Just,
Right.
this was our ask, just for transparency.
Right.
So it was more, I know this is what you're proposing, but, what else? Because part of it was just building trust with Zach and
Totally.
and understanding. Oh, did he cut 8 math interventionists, or you know what I mean? We just wanted to,
Hates math.
Yeah, but I guess that was the whole point of it. It was just, it was an ask. It was an ask from the board to, just for transparency more than anything.
Understand the thinking process. That makes sense.
Okay, Margot.
I would just say to lean back on what Pip reiterated, the way I've always looked at the budget is at the end of the day, our responsibility is advocating for what do we see as the best need for our students and what is the data support. I mean, that's what I lean heavily. We've had a math decrease in scores for years. The data supports that what we've put in is working. Like, when you go to council to ask for something, there's so much numbers behind the ask. And to me, that's fiscally responsible. Some of these asks on here are, yeah, in an ideal world, who wouldn't want all these other things? But at this current time, this board needs to say what is essentially our most focused needs going forward. And then we can build off of that, but this is what we're philosophically committing to. And then we think about the long term and where does that feed in. So to me, that's the way I think we should look at it.
Okay, Zach?
I want to circle way back to Ann's question about retirements. I was just going back through some of my notes. So we have a couple of paraprofessional retirements that we know about, and then at least 2 teacher retirements, both in positions that we'll hang on to. One is if you remember, we did Nancy Moore. We had accepted her resignation and retirement notice, and so we need to continue to have adaptive PE as a thing. And really, I think I had talked to the board
Finding
about
somebody to do
can
it.
we find it, and if we don't find it in a single person, we might have to restructure the position in a way, but to make sure we have the same capacity. And then we also have a special ed case manager coordinator at the high school, which is a position that's core. So we might tweak on the edges of that, depending on what a candidate is, how if we change the structure a little bit. But those are 2 positions that we sometimes the easiest way to change the structure of your organization is to through attrition you make changes. So if somebody leaves, you just don't fill it. But I think these are both roles that we would fill. We might tweak a little, but that we would fill.
Well, the reason I asked about it is that in the past, some years, we have given an option for early retirement as a way of saving. But
Nancy, can I make a motion, or how?
I don't-
Can I make a motion for 3B, or how?
I think what we should do is we take a final vote on the budget, and that's scheduled for February 21st. So I think could we have I think we have a consensus. I think we can say we have a consensus for 3B.
I will bring you an updated summary
Okay.
for 3B so that you can
Okay.
see what it looks like. I'll bring that to you for the next meeting. I'll put it in the packet. I'll put the 2 core elements in the packet so that you'll have that, because I essentially have it done tonight. So you can have that, and then when you get to the public hearing in the meeting of the 14th, the public will understand from the packet what it is that you are then considering, whether you act that night or you wait for another week, whatever you decide to do. And if you want to make more changes, you can, but that will at least bring all of this dialogue to a single piece of paper.
And you could act on the 14th.
You could act on the 14th
Yeah, we
if you want,
actually
as long as
could
you
vote on
open
it
that,
on the
you got to
14th.
reopen that hearing.
Right.
But after that, you
Right.
could take action.
Yep.
Okay. Lisa and Ann, and then we'll sum it up.
Did you have
We'll
another question
close
about
it up.
retirement? Go ahead.
no, I was going to talk about this.
Well, I wanted to say one thing about the green sheet, which is just that I really appreciate that extra information, because I do feel like, watching this before I was on the board and then being on the board, one part of the process that did feel a little frustrating is kind of hearing from people around the district in different ways. Oh, but what about this that I asked for? Or what about that? And this kind of just puts it out there, and it says we are listening to people, we're hearing the needs, and it doesn't mean it's no forever, but it means that we have to figure out what is the most urgent thing right now. So I really appreciate it. And I think the only other thing that I would ask is, I think that to the extent that when we put this in the packet for the next meeting, if we can sort of transparently remind people about the positions that we gave up last year and the commitment that the city council made, and put it like loud and clear in the packet. Like, we took these things out of our budget at your request, and you promised they would come back, because I just think that's important for the public to know. Because, I'm a taxpayer, we're all taxpayers too, and, it's a pocketbook issue for people. And I think being just a little bit advocating for ourselves in that way of saying it's not that we're just trying to stick you with this huge bill, but that we're trying to have you keep your word and keep our word to our kids about what they most urgently need. So that's all.
Ann?
I basically was wanted to talk about the green sheet, that I appreciate that information. I mean, as a teacher in this system, I know that there were things that were perceived needs in certain schools by different people, and once you actually talked about it, you really need to look at the priorities. And so I appreciated seeing and hearing all of this, and I agree priorities are important.
Nathan?
I want to add something to the green sheet that isn't there, and I've hinted at it, I think, a couple of times, but as we draw this process ever closer to a close, the one glaring addition or increase that this budget will need
You need
has.
an extra assistant?
What's that?
You need an extra assistant?
No, that's, nope.
We all need a raise. We all need a raise.
You guys need a raise. That's what I wanted to make sure. The substitutes.
Okay.
So every year I've been here, we have essentially left subs, and this isn't you, this is me, this is us, my office, right? We leave subs flat. I don't know why. It's just part of that culture of this will take care of itself. As we're here and we do more repurposing, and we are more judicious because economic conditions are forcing us to be, and we're going to be over budget on subs. I could guarantee you, this year, next year, the year after. We have raised our rates on subs. We artificially raised them in the middle of COVID because we kind of had to. We softened them up by $5, but they're essentially, we're holding them there because we don't have any choice. If I had it to do, I would probably throw out the system of sub rates that we have now, dramatically increase it, and try to be not just competitive, but decisively competitive here. This is what we need. It's going to be, we may even try to do that, but it'll be difficult without some money. I guess I'm not really suggesting to you that you come back and add more for that purpose, but I will tell you that if I have a $95,000 teacher who retires after 30 years and I can replace it with a $70,000 teacher, I need all that, I need all that breakage to go to help me with the subs, because that really needs a 100, 150, 200, like it needs, because our rates have increased, our consumption seems to have increased, some of our collective bargaining decisions have allowed there to be more time away that has to be covered by subs. I just tell you that so that it's all in the back of your heads. One, you're going to see the overages, and two, in a future periods, we need to start doing something.
Now, I'd say the other thing to realize, so I know I always banked on, in my other district, as people retired, I knew cheaper people were coming in behind them.
Yep.
So I always had, it didn't always work that way. Well, because people are earlier in their careers and there's a scale, and depending on what's going on with families, you might be people that are fresh out of college. It's a whole different total compensation package in terms of, and there tended to be, in most years, some type of buffer, which you couldn't anticipate what it was going to be. So I would say here is somewhat different, and I think Hope alluded to it in terms of looking at the math interventionist position. It's like, oh, well, here we are not always hiring the fresh out of UNH person. We
Depends
have
on
people who are coming to us
position.
with master's degrees, with experience in other places. So we're not always, it's not a guarantee that we're seeing a significant difference in total compensation based on the people we're bringing in, but there's always a possibility.
Okay, so I think we are finished. We will.
Can we just clarify at the end what the next steps are in this? I just want to
Yes.
leave the room with everybody
I
on the
don't
same
think we can
page.
vote on the budget on the 14th because it's not on the agenda, correct?
The agenda hasn't
Not
been
on the
out.
agenda yet.
Do we want that as an item on the agenda, possible approval of the
If possible,
budget?
we have the
If we
flexibility.
put possible, it keeps it, I think that's a
Okay,
good.
all right, so perhaps we'll vote on it on the 14th. If not, we have another session scheduled for the 21st of February.
And if we're voting on the 14th, it has to be in the packet for that meeting, right?
Correct.
With all
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
materials.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are
Which
you-
means the clock's
are
ticking
you
on Thursday.
prepared- Are you
Thursday
prepared
for
to do
us,
that?
end of the day,
Okay.
so
All right.
I do.
Go
I do
ahead.
just want to put out, like, the possible is fine. I mean, we haven't had folks at the hearing, but I do think that's an important part of the process.
Yeah,
That,
the public hearing is in there for the 14th.
Right.
right, I mean, but if there's feedback or changes or
Oh,
things
oh,
like
oh.
that processing.
Right, then we can do it on the 21st. Okay.
I mean, I think, can I suggest that we vote on the ESSER? We could probably take a vote on the next meeting on the ESSER portion, or what we're gonna decide. to
No,
vote
you vote on the
ESSER.
whole budget. You vote on the whole budget,
Okay.
not just ESSER.
Just sort
You
of
don't
give
vote it in
guidance on
segments.
that. Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Okay, why don't we take a 2-minute break?